What is up, y'all? In today's podcast, I want to talk about leadership. It's top of mind for me for several different reasons, but I want to talk about it, one, because over the last few years, I've learned some very valuable lessons about it, and I want to share those lessons with you. And two, because I believe it to be the highest level of leverage that you can achieve in business. Because if you know how to lead, then theoretically you don't need to know how to do anything else. And you could have a very successful business. And so I'm going to share with you what the learning is and some tips that have improved my leadership skills along the way. Who am I? My name is Ryan Rice. I'm a full-time real estate investor. I actually led large teams for 13 and a half years before I jumped into real estate full-time. And last year in my real estate business, we did just under $1.2 million in revenue, and I share stuff with the hopes that it can help you be a better business owner. And so the lesson I learned that I want to share with you is this. Leadership is not a reward for past performance. It's not some mark of achievement. And at least for me in my previous Fortune 30 world, every time I got promoted, I oversaw larger teams. And at the time, I saw it kind of as an accolade. I felt like I gained status because I got promoted, led more people. And here's what I observed about my previous leadership, looking back on it. I excelled when people like me worked for me. People who were hungry, prioritized growth, always wanted to do better, etc. But in reality, does that say as much about me as a leader, right? I think it says more about the individual. If they're already an individual who is a high performer, I don't know that that necessarily speaks to my skill as a leader. And I didn't have a lot of examples of taking a marginal performer and turning them into an amazing performer. And I think that is a skill that speaks more about my leadership than anything else. And what I realize now is that leadership is a heavy, serious burden of responsibility. It is not a reward for previous achievement. And it's a burden of responsibility for a couple of reasons. The best way to lead is to model. And that means you always need to be on your A game. If you're trying to coach someone on something and you don't model the behavior yourself, well, then your team is not going to do it no matter how skilled you are or how hard that you try. Now, what your team will do is copy or mimic your behavior. And so that means if your job is to model, you are burdened with the responsibility of learning the skills necessary to perform at a high level. And two, why I believe that leadership is a burden of responsibility is because when you lead people, your focus shifts away from yourself and it shifts more to the people whom you lead. And it is now your duty to constantly be thinking about how can I help this person most? What can I do for him that would get him closer to his goals? What's the one thing I can help him with that would be the highest level of leverage for his time? Right? You're putting in an incredible amount of effort into seeing what your team member needs to improve. And that for me has been a little bit different. I used to approach development, maybe a little bit differently. It was in my mind, in the way that I used to lead, I left it as the team member's responsibility, right? If they wanted to improve, it was their responsibility to improve. But now I approach it as my responsibility. And I've seen some outsized returns in taking that burden of responsibility on myself. And again, it's definitely heavy to take on a leadership role when you realize how much of a burden that it is. And when I say burden, I don't mean like something negative that you have to carry, but I simply mean a burden of responsibility. It is truly a responsibility. And it's certainly easier not to take on that responsibility for the people who work for you. And while it's harder to do so, it's very rewarding. And when you truly pour in to the people working for you and you see them improve and get better, man, it is super, super, super rewarding. And what I've also learned about leadership is that it doesn't have to be this amorphous subject. We always hear, so-and-so is such a great leader. Well, what does that person do exactly that gets people to describe them that way? In my history of leadership, there haven't always been many people who are good at describing what specifically someone does that makes them a quote great leader. And so I want to talk about that for a minute. What are the specific behaviors that if someone executes on, other people will describe them as a great leader? And here are some things that have helped me. One, have recurring one-on-ones with your direct reports. I do mine weekly, and I invest time up front in those one-on-ones. Before I do a one-on-one with someone, I invest the time up front into an agenda, and each week kind of feeds into the next. And so what I personally do is I use a Google Doc for our one-on-ones, and it makes it very easy. I can just easily scroll down to see last week's one-on-one, and it's helpful to keep them congruent. Two, ensure both you and the person who you're doing the one-on-one with is very clear as to what it is that they want, right? Some employees might want to get promoted. Some just might want to get help. Some rather might want to help you as the owner in the greatest way possible. But getting clear on the outcome that they're after can help you ensure that you keep them on the right track. Three, when you have your one-on-ones, block 20 to 30 minutes before the one-on-one and look at it and ask yourself, what would help this person the most? What would make this one-on-one the most impactful that it has the ability to be? And so this means review past notes. Anytime something happens with one of my team members and it's something that I want to ensure that I follow up with them on, I'll make a little note in my notes app. And I have this little note and I'll pull it up each week. And if there are specific things that I want to talk about with my team, then I'll pull that little note up and we'll talk about it if it's something that'll help make them better. And it's amazing how 20 to 30 minutes of prep can drastically improve the quality of the one-on-one. If you just show up to the one-on-one without any preparation and you just wing it, I mean, maybe it's better than not doing it, but you can give almost, 10x, 20x more to your team member if you just take 20 minutes of preparation beforehand. Your team is worth it. You'll lead so much better if you take this time. Number 4, when they've told you what it is that they want, brainstorm your own development plan for them. And of course, that means, ahead of time, you'll ask them, okay, what do you want? How do you think that you want to get there? And then you can help guide them. But if you also think on your own, like, man, what might help this person get there the fastest, the most efficiently? Come up with 2 to 3 of the highest leverage skills that if that team member learns, it's going to move them closer to their goals in the fastest manner. And then think about what specific activities or what specific behaviors can they execute on in order to learn those skills. And this can simply give them a roadmap of things throughout the year that can help them ultimately get what it is that they want and get there in a more efficient manner. And I found that asking team members what it is that they want and how they want to get there, and then also just giving them some of my own observations on, hey, okay, you want to be a closer? Here are the top 2 or 3 skills that I think are required to be a closer. And here are some activities that you can do within each one of these buckets that are going to help you build those skills. And many times they're going to align with what the team member wants anyways, but them having your perspective is going to be incredibly valuable, especially if you've been in that role before. 5, at the end of the year, have them look back on the past 12 months and write down everything that they're proud of. I found it's always easy to look at the gap between where we currently are and where we want to go. We don't always stop to look at where we are now versus where we were 12 months ago. And it can be so incredibly rewarding to just look back at what we've accomplished in the past 12 months, where we were 12 months ago, and look at where we are now and just celebrate that. And I have found that to not only be a valuable activity that I personally perform, but to ensure that my team is doing that as well. Number 6, when you do have them come up with some things, or when you have them, reflect on the last 12 months, also have them reflect on, okay, what do they want to accomplish in the next 12 months? And something I did this year is I made it optional for my team to include personal outcomes that they want to achieve. And that was really cool because I got to be involved not just in a work setting. And so if they're something to consider. If you want to put in this one-on-one, what do they want to accomplish in their personal life as well? Now, I give them guidance when I did this because I do it for myself. And when I look at my personal outcomes, I say, hey, how do I want to maximize my mental and physical health? How do I want to maximize my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my kids, my relationship with everyone else? What am I passionate about, and what is an outcome that I want to move towards within my passion? What is, what's a financial or a career outcome? And so those are kind of the categories, and I serve those up to them if it helped them think about how they want to perform in those categories of their life. And if that's helpful, feel free to use it. But it was really cool talking with my team about not only what do they personally want to achieve in this role with the company, but they're a person. I don't really believe that work life is separate than their personal life. And so it was kind of neat to hear them talk about what they want to personally accomplish. And if I can help them do that, then I think that'd be really cool. 7, whatever behaviors that you want to see more of, be sure to give tons of kudos for them when you see them. Right? The best way to get a future behavior is to reinforce it when it occurs. And what most people do is they punish or criticize when they see a behavior that they don't want. But what I found more effective is praising the person every time that I see a behavior that I want repeated. That was a big shift in my leadership that I made over the past couple of years, and I've seen some big payoff from it. 8, and you'll have more opportunities to give these kudos if you set daily or weekly check-ins on their KPIs, right? The more check-ins that you have with your team, the more opportunities you'll have to get them kudos. Let me give you an example. My sales guy, every single day, at the end of the day, he reports on specific KPIs in his business. I did this, this, and this. And so every single day, I get an opportunity to say, wow, great job with this. Hey, cool, nice work with this. And I get to see what he's accomplished, and I get to see what he's done, but it's more of an opportunity for me to give him kudos. And then at the end of the week, he cumulatively puts it all together and gives me a report on how the week went. And again, it's another opportunity for me to give kudos. And so if you set these daily or weekly check-ins for people on your team to essentially just report to you what they have done, you get more and more opportunities to give them kudos for the behaviors that you want to see repeated. And so for people trying to make a shift from punishment-based leadership over to like a kudos or a praise-based leadership, the more opportunities you have to give praise can help reinforce that culture more, right? And so it's kind of this, you're forcing a praise-based culture upon your company by giving more and more opportunities to give that praise, if that makes sense. Number 9, the best way to see a behavior emulated in your business is to emulate it yourself. And I mentioned this already, but if you want your salespeople, for example, to pick up the phones on the weekends, well, do you pick up your phones on the weekends? If you want your team to show up on time to recurring meetings, or if they're not going to show up on time, to send you a note beforehand, well, are you showing up on time? Do you communicate with your team if for some reason that you're not? Just because you're the owner or you're the boss doesn't mean that you should respect someone else's time by showing up to a meeting on time or communicating to them beforehand if for some reason that you can't. And so if you want to see a behavior, or maybe better said, if there's something going on in your business that you're not cool with, maybe first ask, is that something that you are emulating? And if you are, then maybe you can move to the next step. But if you're not, then you can make an adjustment. And 10, and lastly here, keep the bar high. I ask myself every time I bring on someone new, does this person make our team better? Do they pull our team up? And if the answer is no, then I know down deep it's not the right fit, regardless of how much I might like the person. Nothing sucks the air out of a great culture than hiring someone the rest of the team has to pull forward. But what jumpstarts a culture, and I have experienced this firsthand, is bringing someone on your team who will pull up the rest of your team. It's such a good way to continue to advance the high performance culture in your business. So just some leadership thoughts here on this fine day. It's such an important part of business, and I think it's one of the more difficult parts of business, and it's something that I've talked a ton about here on this podcast, or rather, it's something I haven't talked a ton about here on this podcast, and so that's why I wanted to make this. If you like this, would you share it? The only way this podcast grows is by telling other people about it. And I would greatly appreciate if you continue to share it. That's the only way that it grows. So I appreciate you guys. I love y'all, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.